Welcome to Ideas in Action, the official University of Southern California podcast. This show was recorded live on USC's campus.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Women's History Month. My name is Megan Vandertorn. I use both she and they pronouns, and I am one of our Student Equity and Inclusion Programs managers in Student Affairs, overseeing both gender equity resources and the LGBTQ+ Student Center. Every March, we come together to celebrate the contributions of women, uplift their many inspiring and harrowing personal narratives, and reflect upon the strides we still need to make to achieve true equity for all women. We want to begin this Women's History Month kickoff by acknowledging that USC is on the traditional land of the Tongva people. For thousands of years, the Tongva lived on this land we are gathering on today, and the Tongva were considered the most powerful indigenous peoples to inhabit the Los Angeles Basin. Along with the Tongva, we also recognize the Chumash, Tataviam, Serrano, Cahuilla, Juanillo, and Luiseno peoples for the land that USC also occupies around Southern California. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here today. We hope you join us in uncovering such truths at any and all events in the future. This year's theme for Women's History Month is Providing Healing, Promoting Hope, honoring both the role of women as caregivers and frontline workers during the pandemic and the historical ways women across cultures globally have provided healing and hope. We have a variety of speakers, performers, and panelists who are going to share their stories, their reflections, and their activisms with us this afternoon. To get us started, I am pleased to introduce USC President, Dr. Carol Folt.
Thank you, Megan. And greetings, everyone. Today kicks off Women's History Month at USC. We'll have a month full of events celebrating Trojan women and women leaders who inspire us every day. Of course, this month builds on our deep legacy and history. Unlike most universities in America, USC was actually co-ed, diverse, and international from its start in the late 1880s. And in fact, our first valedictorian was a woman, Minnie Miltmore. And this legacy of leadership continues today. For example, our current undergraduate student government president is a woman, Alexis Arias. And our graduate student government president is a woman, KJ Queen. And among our staff, the president of our staff assembly is a woman, Christy Culpepper. Today is a day to celebrate this history and these accomplishments of women of USC past and present, and to look forward and ahead at their leadership for the future. This year's theme is Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. And I'd like to thank the outstanding planning committee for organizing today's events, and the wonderful speakers as well as the performers for sharing their stories and their talents with us. This theme reminds us of women in our own lives who have been sources of healing and hope. From our mothers, our sisters, our daughters and aunts, to our friends, our mentors, and professors. We all have them. You have them, just like my own Gloria, Lee, Tessa, Ellie, Gigi, Karen, Terry, Celia, and so many more. The theme also reminds us of all the extraordinary women on the front line. One study found that nearly 65% of frontline workers are women. There are healthcare workers, first responders, caregivers, and service industry workers, and they've been working tirelessly since the beginning to offer healing and restore hope. And today, we're all thinking about all the tireless workers and women and children and families in the Ukraine who are fighting so valiantly for their own freedom. Today is Dr. Carolyn Meltzer's first day as Dean of the Keck School of Medicine. She's the second woman to lead KSOM, and her start today marks another important milestone for women in academic medicine. Last year, there were only 24% of the deans at USC medical schools were women. And in leading our Keck School, she's joining a community that did so much during the pandemic, including bringing the COVID vaccine to older adults who were homebound. You're going to hear from Dean Meltzer in a moment. Also at Keck, Dr. Tarina Khan, a clinical associate professor of emergency medicine. Early in the pandemic, she helped to develop the outdoor COVID evaluation tent at Keck Medical Center. I'm sure many of you went there. She also oversaw physician staffing at the vaccine clinic. And in January, she was named Chief Medical Officer for the USC Verdugo Hills Hospital. While the number of women in medicine continues to rise, one report found that only 3% of women physicians held this leadership position. And at Viterbi, Professor Andrea Armani worked with students to create a UV light sterilization box so that PPE can be reused by healthcare workers. In 6 minutes, it can sterilize 3 face shields, and it can be built with things found at stores like Lowe's or Home Depot. Her work continues to draw acclaim. In fact, the American Association for the Advancement of Science recently welcomed her into its ranks. But healing doesn't just happen through research. Nature and the arts can be healing forces as well. And we've seen so many creative representations of healing and hope in our community, from public art to new exhibitions featuring remarkable women. Just last semester, the Art and Hope at the End of the Tunnel exhibition at the Fisher Museum included many amazing women artists. It was a beautiful tribute to our resilience. One piece that comes to mind is Lori Raskin's Los Angeles, My Sunshine. It's a mix of clean lines and contrasts. There was City Hall across the canvas from multiple perspectives. It's wonderful. The buildings were mostly shades of white and gray. Some stood tall, some were small, others were angled, but then there were bursts of color, bright yellow City Hall buildings in a sea of muted tones. Lori said she used the iconic City Hall building to symbolize energy and possibility. And her work reminds us of what hope can be, bright energy and the electrifying promise of possibility. Women's History Month is all about celebrating women's achievements in all areas, and this year marks a special milestone, the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Let's celebrate Trojan women around us every day who make our community that much more vibrant. Today's event is just the start of a month-long celebration of great achievements by our students, our faculty, our staff, and our alumni. Let's fight on together. Now it's my great pleasure to pass it over to Dean Meltzer. She comes to USC from Emory University in Atlanta, where she served as the chair of radiology for 15 years. She's a radiologist, nuclear medicine doctor, and a compassionate leader. I can't wait to hear what she has to say to us. Please join me in welcoming her to our USC community.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Meltzer. I'm delighted to be joining you on this first day of Women's History Month 2022 with the fitting theme of providing healing, promoting hope. Indeed, I'm delighted to join you today to celebrate advances made and focus on the needed work ahead to support women in medicine and in science. It has been a lifelong thread in my own professional and personal path. I was fortunate to have many who came before me etch a path that I could follow. And the greatest joy in my own career has been mentoring, sponsoring, and helping to broaden that path further for those to follow. I recall bursting with pride when my first medical student mentee gave a talk at a national conference, and again years later when she was honored as a distinguished physician scientist. The journey toward true equity for women, and especially those with intersectional identities, is just that, a journey. We've made great strides, yet COVID put particular pressure on the disproportionate societal responsibilities and expectations of women, and progress has slipped back. Yet it was also a time where so many banded together to support one another and to try to dampen that slide. As we emerge from the COVID pandemic, we must examine the lessons learned and push forward together with new resolve. I look forward to meeting so many of you and to partnering to continue to accelerate our pace on this journey toward equity and excellence for women. It is the way that we can address the most complex problems that face us in health and medicine. We need all the talent together.
Hi, I'm Karen Mack, founder and executive director of LA Commons. Now, I was lucky enough growing up to be surrounded by inspirational women, including my mother, Viola Calhoun Mack, now 92, who moved here from rural Louisiana in her 20s in search of opportunity, and while I was growing up, obtained her master's degree in education. Likewise, my grandmother, Flora J. Mack, a generation earlier, was a lauded educator, but also mayor of her tiny integrated town in rural Oklahoma. She actually came amazingly to USC to get her master's in education in the 1950s. They taught me that I could do anything, that I didn't have to set limits, which is why I think I had the courage to start my own organization 20 years ago, LA Commons. We empower LA neighborhoods by engaging youth, artists, and community members in a creative process to uplift their local narratives through public art. Stories have power, and with our partners, we make them visible to the benefit of all involved, and in particular, our young people, many of who have their voices heard for the first time. One of the most exciting things for me to think about in honor of Women's History Month are the young women I get to support and inspire, just like my grandmother and mother did for me. USC is a fantastic partner in this work. People across the campus, but especially local government relations and the Good Neighbors campaign, whom we have worked with developing young women artists as civic leaders for over 10 years. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Vivian. I'm one of the marketing directors at USC Own It Women's Leadership Summit. USC Own It values empowerment, representation, preparation, transparency, allyship, and growth. With all of these values, we strive to bridge the gap between female and non-binary leaders and the students who want to follow their footsteps. Each year, we host an annual summit filled with amazing speakers, incredible networking opportunities, and honestly, just a lot of fun. One of my past favorite Own It speakers and a personal hero of mine has been Amanda Nguyen, who is the founder of RISE. Amanda turned her own traumatic experience of sexual assault into something powerful. The Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act, which now benefits and protects survivors throughout the nation. Our summit has been filled with inspirational speakers just like Amanda, and I'm thrilled to invite everyone here to our 2022 USC Own It Women's Leadership Summit happening on March 6th on campus at the TCC Ballroom. Once again, that's March 6th. I really hope to see you all there. Purchase your tickets today at 2022uscownit.eventbrite.com. I am so happy to hopefully see you there because it's going to be such an incredible experience. Thank you so much for having USC Own It in this celebration of Women's History Month. At USC Own It, we can't be more thrilled to continue our mission in uplifting the voices of female and non-binary folks throughout the world at all times possible. Thank you so much for having us. Fight on. And we hope to see you on March 6th.
Hi, my name is Natasha Sanchez-Crystal, and I am a fourth-year resident and one of the chiefs in the emergency department here at LA County. If I'm being completely honest, for a very long time it felt as if the world was on fire and we were standing there with mere buckets of water, trying to survive, trying to protect those that we could from what felt like an inevitable end, and trying with everything in us to bring hope despite all of the uncertainty. Really, coming to work didn't feel heroic. It was a terrifying privilege, but one that opened my eyes to a kind of resilience, courage, and strength that I couldn't have imagined before. Those are the stories that I now see when I reflect upon the pandemic. It's the faces of so many women in our community who, despite their minimum wage salaries, were asked to risk exposure and work outside their homes as essential workers. The faces of the many who reassured their families and fought against all odds with such ferocious strength and faith when they landed in our department as patients. And to the numerous women who I worked alongside, our environmental staff, clerical staff, nurses, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, residents, and attendings, to say that I have been inspired by my colleagues would be an enormous understatement. Witnessing their resilience as they continuously brought empathy and dignity to the bedside, all while carrying the emotional toll of months of mass casualties. Witnessing their sacrifice as they left their partners and children for weeks at a time as their work exposures heightened. And witnessing their courage and strength as they navigated what the pandemic would mean for their personal reproductive healthcare goals and postponed treatments. These women are fierce, and their strength, resilience, and courage should be celebrated. But this is also a time for us to acknowledge the sacrifices that have been made, the impact that these last 2 years have had on us physically and emotionally. So in the tone of Patrisse Cullors' reflections during last year's Women's History Month, this is an opportunity to lift one another up and to bring those that have been left behind or have borne the brunt of the burden along with us. May we learn from the inequities that were made so transparent during the pandemic and be persistent in advocating for a better and more equitable future.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. We are so grateful to have been able to hear your stories and your insights. To round out our event this afternoon, we wanted to engage in a dialogue around this year's theme, Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. Please join me in welcoming our panel and panel moderator, Dr. Darby Saxby.
Hello and welcome. I'm honored to moderate this panel for Women's History Month. And I'm excited to introduce you to the rest of the panel. I'm Darby Saxby. I'm a professor of psychology at USC Dornsife, and I direct the USC Center for the Changing Family, an interdisciplinary hub for family studies research at USC. I'm thrilled to tell you about the rest of the panel, and I'll have each of them go around and give you their names and affiliations. Let's start with you, Latoya Council.
Hi, everyone. My name is Latoya Council. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a PhD candidate in the Department of Sociology.
Hi, my name's Parveen Parmer. I'm an emergency physician and the director for the Center for GEMS, Gender Equity in Medicine and Science, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hi, excuse me. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here with all of you on the kickoff for Women's History Month. My name is Catherine Spear. I'm the Vice President for USC's Office for Equity, Equal Opportunity, and Title IX, and I serve as the university's Title IX coordinator, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. My name is Jessica Mintel Kim. My pronouns are she or hers. I'm currently a senior studying environmental engineering and international relations. And on campus, I serve as the chief programming officer for the undergraduate student government.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Freeman Cohen, and I use she, they pronouns. I am a graduate student at the USC Rosier School of Education in their post-secondary administration and student affairs program. And I'm also the graduate student for our LGBTQ+ Student Center.
Hey, let's get started. So as we heard, this year's national theme is Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. And this theme really highlights and honors the critical work of women around the globe as caregivers and community healers. But it may also lean into some gendered stereotypes of women being expected to be care providers. So I'm curious how each of you personally resonate with this theme. Why or why not might that be the case? And let's start with you, Parveen, since you're an emergency medicine physician.
Certainly. I think Natasha really said it best. We as emergency providers were able to see firsthand a lot of the difficulty that our community faced during the last pandemic. And I think it was very clear to many of us, everyone struggled, certainly everyone struggled, but the women that came in, struggled in their illnesses and, sort of the responsibilities they had to their families, that they, keeping their jobs at the same time. And then, of course, people struggled, I think, in their roles as caregivers in the emergency department as well, whether they were, staff, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, balancing all of the needs to keep their households going. In addition to, having to come to our emergency department and then provide care. It would be ideal, someday to be able to find ways for women to be able to thrive in their caregiving roles and at work and really share the burden in much more equitable ways. And I think that's something that we're all working towards.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to chime in on that question?
Sure. I would just add to what Parveen was saying that I hope that we get to the space where there is value given to having that being the caregiver or being nurturing, providing healing for our community members as something that's lifted up and is valued not only outside of one's professional work environment, but also within that work environment. And for me, I think when the healing or the nurturing piece, the hopeful piece of the theme for this year's Women's History Month, I'm trying to lean into, again, recognizing the need for equity in all aspects of our lives. And I think just starting with our new Dean of KSOM, with Parveen being in the medical field as a doctor, just looking at that in terms of the health field as well, equity in those who care within that field, and many others, I think is really important.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I would love to add on too. I think this theme is such a good time for us to reconsider where women belong. Like, so many people don't think women belong in leadership spaces, but I think this is precisely the reason why we make such great leaders. Like, in personal experience, even in high school and even at USC, some of the leaders that I really looked up to were all women because they were so nurturing, because they were so empathetic, and because they were able to bring our groups out of difficulties with such confidence and honesty. So I think this is a great time for us to think about how these traits make us great leaders too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I was once at a speaker series with Tiffany D. Lofton, who is the National Director of the NAACP Youth and College Division. And something that she said still sticks with me today. In the progress of community organizing, we do not all need to be protesters. We need those in office who are constantly voicing the concerns of the people rather than filling their own pockets. We need those in our hospitals, ensuring that our community members are getting the care and the medical treatment that they need. We need those in all aspects of life, fighting for the Black community and other communities to be free of oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, and so much more. And one of the biggest takeaways from the lecture for me is that even if not everyone has the capacity or the endurance to be on the ground, putting their life on the line, that doesn't mean that they can't contribute in other ways in making the world a different place. And I feel like one of the things that is most important is that you cannot have gender equity if you are not including the voices of, Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, queer, trans, non-binary, and many others of the subaltern into the conversation with a seat at the table.
And I'll add my little 2 cents at the end here. So I also think, to highlight exactly what was just stated, this idea of the history and the legacy of care work. The question is like, well, is this like the gender inequality in a sense? But we think about like communities of color, particularly Black communities. I'm thinking about Black women and the work that I do in my research, how community care and caregiving has been a response to larger systems of inequality, namely race and gender oppression by the state, and how having to combat those things in the community meant a form of caregiving and care and nurturance that women had to do. And so I think in Women's History Month, honoring and respecting that work, how long the legacy is, how deep the legacy, the historical roots of it, and currently, and using this as an opportunity to make sure that we are, when we're talking about health equity, when we're talking about justice, we're also looking at other intersections of inequality as well.
It sounds like you're saying that care work is sort of an act of political resistance, and it's always had this long intersectional legacy. And kind of following up on that, we saw a real collapse during the pandemic of some of the structures, daycares, schools, elder care facilities that scaffold families and sort of support caregiving needs. And women took on sort of a default burden of caregiving, and their workforce participation dropped as a result, down to levels that we haven't seen since the 1980s. So why do we think that happened, and how can we rebound from that, both in terms of whether we value care as a culture and also in terms of helping women to re-engage in the workforce?
I wouldn't actually, if it's okay, I'd like to jump in. I think one of the things we need to talk about during Women's History Month is men as well, right? we need to continue to lift up and support all women. So women hailing from all different identities, certainly. But I think if we're going to consider how to move forward towards a more equitable society with regards to caregiving, and also, getting more women in the STEM, sort of fields and all of these things, let's continue to lift up the men who support those goals. And also let's start to break down these gender norms that make caregiving a more female trait. It's something that men do very well, actually. So I'd love to see some conversations around that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. And, there has been this kind of massive, well-funded push to encourage girls and women to enter STEM careers. We haven't necessarily seen the same energy around encouraging men to pursue traditionally feminized careers like early education, nursing, social work, or to increase participation of gender equity in domestic labor. So is that our next frontier in gender equity, is not necessarily to see how to encourage women to enter certain sectors, but actually to encourage men to enter sectors that have traditionally been considered the domains of women.
Well, and I would suggest that maybe we start earlier before people come to us in higher education, that we're looking at children as they are being raised through their families, through their communities, through their school systems, through K through 12, that those are important times to start more broadly breaking down those gender norms across the board. And also thinking about just the general nature of structures that are left. Back to your original question about the impact of the pandemic, I also want to just highlight that I think it's created a real opportunity for us to think in an innovative way about how we structure the workday and what that looks like. I'm a lawyer by background. I'm not in my current position. And I know when I was growing up and going to law school, there was a book about women lawyers and how the lawyers in private practice, their workday was set by men and focused on that sort of that lifestyle, but that it wasn't necessary. But it's remained very entrenched in that field. And then you see that replicated in many other aspects of our lives.
Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
I keep doing that. So sorry. I would love to talk about what you previously said too, Darby, about just encouraging more men to pursue these other fields. I am a product of that first wave of parents, teachers really pushing girls to pursue STEM. Like, I'm in engineering and I love it, but I think such a big reason why they pushed it was for economic independence, telling us that you don't have to depend on your husband, you don't have to get married in order to have a sustainable lifestyle. So I wonder how we could better encourage men to pursue other fields that might not be as high paying. I just wonder how that would happen. But I do think that would be something nice that we can pursue.
Yeah. And I would actually respond to that to say, are these fields high paying because they're traditionally male dominated, right? We've seen incomes tend to decrease in more feminized careers as more women enter those careers. Computer programming used to be female dominated. And then it sort of became this very male typed career in the 70s and 80s, and salaries increased. So maybe the way to get care careers to be better compensated is to get more men to enter them. Just sort of like a little bit of a reverse direction of causality. So another question for the panel, are there gender structures and norms that you see in your organization or department that you would like to dismantle? And I'll start with you, Rachel.
Yeah, I was just about to ask if I could go. So when I was a student leader at UC Santa Cruz, I was a part of a few institutional committees because they were a requirement of my position. I was our vice president of diversity and inclusion for our student union assembly. And so I knew that, given the way historically that some of these institutional committees have been ran, I knew that little would get done, as many times, it seemed like we were having the same conversations. We were kind of, going around in circles, but nevertheless, it was an opportunity for me to voice out my concerns to senior level administrators from different departments. And so very soon to me, though, it became apparent that not many of the committee members, were actively listening to my words. I was very aware of how members were dismissive. And it even got to a point where, we were in a small breakout room and I had to ask a cisgender male not to cut me off when it was very clear that I wasn't finished talking. And of course, I feel like there were many reasons for why that happened. One of them, I think, is that it could be because, I identify as a multiracial, queer, femme-presenting individual. And, there's a lot of intersections with that. Not to mention that, I was an undergraduate student. I didn't have, the credentials to speak on these experiences, even though, I had a lived experience for many of them. And so, I feel like, I feel like that contributed a really big way of, being kind of forced into this like gender role structure. So I do wonder, a lot of times is that, I'm a graduate student, I'll be getting my degree in May. And I wonder, how is that going to look different after, I walk across that stage? Or, will my degree speak for itself?
I would say to this question, I think it kind of goes with the question that was just asked about, work organizations. And I'm thinking about, yes, does my discipline sociology, is there work that needs to be done, or even around equity and gender equity and even like work distribution in my department or like in the discipline at large? I would say, of course. But I think too, we're saying like, oh, well, maybe if more men do certain jobs, then that will increase the caregiving and equity. I also think that we, paying attention to the pay gap, right? The compensation for women's time in these positions, right? Yes, we can have more men sit on service, committees or, do certain jobs and value that work because that work is valuable. But at the same time, the equity of coming in terms of like compensating women fairly for their time and resources that they're time and money that they're giving to these things, right? So thinking about like the larger pay gap, women are still paid less than men today in 2022 in certain sectors. So it's like, how can we account for that? How do we change that, right? So I will say, yes, bringing more men to the table and compassionate care, loving kindness, holding them accountable is one thing we can do and we should do. But we also need to, write legislators, write our senators in Congress and really push for women to be paid equitable wages and the wages that they deserve to be paid for what they're doing in the different sectors in which we're employed.
In addition to this being Women's History Month, we're also reaching the 50th anniversary of Title IX. So why is this milestone worth celebrating? And what does this anniversary mean to us as faculty, as staff, and as students? Let's start with you, Catherine.
Well, that seems an appropriate place to start since I mentioned I'm the Title IX coordinator for USC. So I think in my career in civil rights, Title IX, along with the other federal civil rights laws, have been very instrumental and important in understanding that history. And we talk about, when we think about the importance of women, there were three women and many more who were critical in getting Title IX to be enacted in 1972 and become effective at that point. And so it's really exciting to have the 50th anniversary. I know the university, the athletics department, the university writ large, our office are wanting to plan events to talk about that history. And it opens so many doors. We still have a long way to go. Many don't realize that part of, particularly the impact somewhere like USC and higher education, is that the impetus for Title IX was to really focus on education and ensuring that there was access for women, both as students and as faculty and employees of various colleges and universities across the country. And then, several years into that legislation, then it became important, of course, as we know, for equity in athletics. And then as it evolves, the focus on sexual harassment and assault and other forms of power dynamics and balances for all those issues, as my co-panelist was mentioning, equity in pay and related acts is so critical. So I think it's really important, and we hope everyone takes time as we're approaching June 23rd, the actual anniversary, starting with Women's History Month, to really learn about the history of Title IX and its wide-ranging impact, and how much more we can and hope to do with that legislation going into the future.
Yeah, as I'm listening to Catherine speak, it's hard to believe it's been 50 years because and I think reflecting back on, what has changed since this was implemented, there's a lot of positive change, which is fantastic. But, certainly there is a long way to go, a tremendous distance to go. And I don't suppose 50 years ago that the people that authored this, I imagine they had higher hopes for us. So I do think we have a long way to go. And I want to acknowledge as well that USC is, we're dealing with some histories here as well, where we haven't always gotten this right. And I think it's important to own that today, but we're all collectively trying to move forward and trying to move our community forward in positive ways, both for those of us on campus and those of us in our communities.
Yeah, I would love to add on to that as well. Before I came into this position in the undergraduate student government, I served as a co-executive director for the Asian Pacific American Student Assembly. And during the COVID years, a lot of racism was happening. A lot of other things were happening inside and outside of the classroom. And a lot of students came to us, the directors of cultural assemblies, to talk about what happened. And a lot of times this was because they were intimidated to go talk to Title IX, or they already went and then they were discouraged after the process. So I think this anniversary would be a great time to inspire more collaboration between the office and also these student groups. These student groups are the ones that know what students need and want, because students have confidence in us, but it's the offices that really have the chance to change these institutions to really serve these students. So I think this would be a great year to start looking more into that too.
So another part of the theme for this year is promoting hope. And I'm curious, what are some things that make you hopeful about the future of women and the progress still to come? And how about we start with you, Latoya?
Well, I am hopeful that I have a lot of hope, and we've made, we have a lot to do, but we've accomplished so much. I mean, I think about just in a matter of months, we're about to have a new Supreme Court justice who's a Black woman, right? We have a vice president of the U.S. who's Black and South Asian, right? Those are big advancements right there. You have like women like Stacey Abrams, you have like Latinx women who are on the ground mobilizing whole groups of communities in the U.S., making sure that people have access to the right to vote, fighting to keep the right to vote. You have young women in Congress like AOC and others. So I have a lot of examples of women who are doing the work on the ground. So in the US alone. And so I could go global, right? Like just around the world, just on the ground doing the work and saying, no, we have shoulders that we're standing on, and we matter, and our voices and our experiences in the world matter. And climate change is a women's issue. Racism is a women's issue. Education is a women's issue. War is a women's issue. And we're going to have our voice. We're going to have a seat at the table. So I'm hopeful. And there's so many examples. Got a lot of work to do, but we made a lot of examples.
Anytime I think about the future, for women, I think about one of my all-time favorite quotes by Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much. You should aim to be successful, but not too successful. Otherwise, you would threaten the man. Because I am female, I am expected to aspire to marriage. I am expected to make my life choices, always keeping in mind that marriage is the most important. Now, marriage can be a source of joy and love and mutual support. But why do we teach girls to aspire to marriage and we don't teach boys the same? We raise girls to see each other as competitors, not for jobs or accomplishments, which I think can be a good thing, but for the attention of men. We teach girls that they cannot be sexual beings in the way that boys are. And I see a shift in all of this happening. I see that, we're having more gender equity within, different places of the world, within the workforce. But of course, I acknowledge that there's still a lot of work to be done. But I am hopeful and excited to see, what women accomplish in the future. I'm very excited to see us grow and become individuals who are no longer told to hold back, who are no longer told that there is a glass ceiling, that there's only so much that we can accomplish. And I really cannot wait for the day when we understand and see, how much potential we hold within ourselves, because honestly, like the sky is the limit and the sky is endless. So I think we're going to do a lot of really great and big things in the future.
And I have a lot of hope because I see students and young leaders and, my residents, my med students like those on this panel. And, they're not gonna accept anything less than what everyone should have, which is real equality. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah, I think everyone on this panel gives me hope, and those that I work in and interact with day in and day out, both in my personal and professional life, what I see happening around the world. I try to just focus on those hopeful moments, those voices moving us forward to where we want to be and where we need to be, and continuing, despite many of us saying we've got a long way to go, that everybody is up for that, and continuing on that journey and doing it, being mindful, back to the concept of healing as well, along with that hope of carrying along with that other individuals and caring about others as we move forward to have the world where that equity is where it needs to be for everyone.
Connecting with other generations also gives me hope for the future. Like talking to my grandma, like she had to beg to go to middle school, and education was just not like seen as this important thing for her. And even in my mom's generation, like going to college a lot of times was to look for a husband. But in my generation, like my friends and I take school so seriously. So even from that like small personal example, I can see that things are changing. And I think another thing that gives me hope just on a global level is just representation. I think when a lot of female leaders are spotlighted for being leaders, not in that traditional sense where they're uncompromising and they're very male-like. When I see leaders that don't act like that, it gives me a lot of hope too.
So it sounds like we're all finding a lot of reason to be hopeful for the future. And it was a pleasure having the opportunity to chat with all of you to commemorate Women's History Month. So I look forward to reconnecting in other spaces and settings, and reflecting on the progress that women have made and the long road that is ahead to achieve gender equity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saxby and our lovely panel. To conclude this year's Women's History Month kickoff, we celebrate healing and joy through music. Give a warm welcome to one of our upcoming 2022 graduates, Hannah Abraham, as she shares her beautiful vocal talents with us. And thank you again to all of our speakers, panelists, and performers for sharing their thoughts and stories with us this afternoon. I hope everyone has a wonderful Women's History Month, and fight on.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook.